The kiss my husband gave me at the front door was perfect. It was a carefully calibrated blend of affection, passion, and a hint of sad farewell, the kind of kiss a man gives the woman he adores before leaving on a long trip. "I'll miss you like." "Crazy," he murmured against my lips, his hand stroking my hair. "But think of it, Izzy. 2 weeks in the Maldives. The launch of a lifetime. When I get back, we'll be set for life." I smiled, my heart swelling with a love so profound it was almost painful. "Just close the deal, Alex," I said. "I'll be waiting. I'm so proud of you." He gave me one last lingering look, his eyes full of what I thought was love, and then he was gone, striding towards the waiting taxi, the picture of a man on the cusp of his destiny. I watched until the car turned the corner, then closed the door, a happy, contented sigh escaping my lips. Our life, after 10 years of struggle, was finally beautifully falling into place. I was Dr. Isabella Rossi, an astrophysicist. My world was a universe of quiet cosmic truths, of elegant equations that describe the birth and death of stars. I found my comfort in the vast, silent dance of galaxies. Alex, my husband, was a man of the earth. He was a brilliant, charismatic, and, until now, perpetually unlucky entrepreneur. His life was a series of almosts, of ventures that were always on the verge of a breakthrough that never quite came. I was the steady, quiet star, and he was the fiery, beautiful comet, always streaking across my sky, full of promise. I was the primary breadwinner, my university salary and research grants providing the stable ground for his ambitious launches. I never minded. I believed in him with an absolute, unshakable faith. His latest venture, Helios, a revolutionary data compression algorithm, was different. He had finally secured a meeting with a legendary, reclusive tech billionaire in the Maldives, a man who could make or break companies with a single check. This was it, the culmination of all his dreams. I was so lost in my happy thoughts, picturing our future, that I was halfway to the airport in my own taxi before the cold, sickening realization hit me. My wallet, I had left it on the hall table, right next to the keys. I groaned, a wave of annoyance washing over me. My flight was in 2 hours. I had just enough time. I rerouted the taxi, my mind racing through the logistics of getting back. Through security, I paid the driver and let myself into our quiet, sun-drenched house. The silence felt different now, charged with the lingering energy of our happy farewell. I tiptoed in, not wanting to disturb the perfect memory. I saw my wallet on the hall table and snatched it up, a wave of relief washing over me. I was just about to turn and leave when I heard his voice, Alex's voice. He was in his study, the door slightly ajar. He was supposed to be halfway to the airport himself. My first thought was a flicker of annoyance. Had he missed his flight? But then I heard the words, and the world stopped turning. "The timing is perfect," he was saying, his voice no longer the warm, loving tone of the man I knew, but a cold, sharp, clinical whisper. "Her flight leaves in 2 hours. Mine leaves in 3, from a different terminal, under the new name. By the time she lands in London and realizes I'm not on the connecting flight, I'll be halfway to Brazil." I froze, my hand on the doorknob, my body turning to ice. My blood felt thick and slow in my veins. This wasn't a conversation, it was a monologue. He was talking to someone, but they weren't in the room. He was on the phone. "No, the accounts are already clear," he continued, a note of smug satisfaction in his voice. "I've been moving her assets for the last 6 months, piece by piece, into the offshore accounts." The Helios venture was the perfect cover story. She's so blinded by her faith in my genius. She never once questioned the paperwork I had her sign, power of attorney, liquidation of her stock portfolio to fund the launch. She just signed it all with that trusting, stupid little smile on her face. Have you ever had a moment where the audio of your life becomes disconnected from the video? I was standing in my beautiful sunlit hallway, the scent of fresh coffee still in the air, a perfect picture of domestic happiness, but the words I was hearing were from a different movie entirely. A horror movie, a story of a monster who looked just like my husband. What about her? A voice on the other end of the phone crackled, a voice I vaguely recognized as his brother, a man I had always found shifty and unpleasant. What about her? Alex laughed, a short, ugly, chilling sound I had never heard before. She'd be fine. For a while. She'd land in London, realize I'm gone, and then she'd discover the accounts are empty. Her company, her house, her inheritance, it's all gone. I've left her with enough in her checking account to buy a bus ticket back to whatever sad little town she crawled out of. She was a means to an end, a 10-year investment that has finally, gloriously matured. He paused, and his next words were the ones that shattered not just my heart, but my soul. She was always so exhausting. Her quiet intelligence, her brilliant mind. It was like living with a judge. I can't wait to be with someone who just adores me, no questions asked. Someone who doesn't make me feel like a failure every single day. I didn't hear any more. I couldn't. I backed away from the door, my movements silent, my body a vessel of pure cold shock. The grief, the rage, the heartbreak, it would all come later. In that moment, all I felt was a profound, terrifying clarity. The man I had loved, the man I had supported, the man I had built my life around was a phantom. A carefully constructed character, a role he had been playing for a decade. And the final act of his play was my complete and utter ruin. I stood in the hallway, my wallet clutched in my hand, the keys to my own home suddenly feeling like the keys to a prison. I had two choices. I could confront him, create a scene, a messy, ugly, and ultimately useless explosion of pain and betrayal. Or I could stay silent. I could let him believe his perfect plan was still in motion. I could let him walk into the trap he had set for me, without him ever knowing that I was no longer the prey. I was the hunter. I took a deep, silent breath. I turned, and as quietly as I had entered, I walked out of the front door, closing it gently behind me. I walked down the street and into a new, terrifying, and unknown life. The old one had just been revealed as a lie. And later, there would be a reckoning. The taxi ride back to the airport was the longest journey of my life. I sat in the back seat, the city blurring past the window, and I replayed the last 10 years in my mind. Every memory was now tainted, every loving gesture a calculated move, every shared dream a carefully crafted lie. He hadn't just been planning to leave me. He had been systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, right under my nose. And I, the brilliant astrophysicist who could map the movement of distant stars, had been completely, utterly blind. To the black hole that was living in my own home, there is a unique kind of humiliation in being deceived by someone you love. It's not just that they lied to you. It's that they made you a willing, cheerful accomplice in your own destruction. I had signed the papers. I had celebrated his almosts. I had propped up the very man who was sawing off the branch I was sitting on. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was mine. A betrayal of my own intellect, my own intuition. By the time I reached the airport, the shock had begun to recede, replaced by a cold, hard, and unfamiliar fury. The heartbroken woman who had left the house was gone. In her place was a scientist with a problem to solve. The problem was my husband, and the solution would need to be precise, methodical, and absolute. I walked through the airport, a ghost in a crowd of happy travelers. I checked the departures board. My flight to London was on time. I saw another flight leaving from a different terminal in 3 hours to Sao Paulo, Brazil. His escape route. I went to my gate. I sat down, and I began to plan out my greatest asset. I realized was his arrogance. He believed I was a naive academic, a woman who understood the universe but not the world. He believed I was emotionally fragile, that when I discovered his betrayal, I would crumble. He was expecting tears, hysteria, a messy, emotional collapse. He was not expecting a cold, calculated, and strategic response. My second greatest asset was time. I had a 12-hour flight to London ahead of me. 12 hours where he believed I was hurtling towards my own ruin, completely unaware. 12 hours for me to begin building my counteroffensive. I boarded the plane and took my seat in business class, a seat he had paid for with my own money. As the plane took off, I didn't look out the window at the city I was leaving behind. I opened my laptop. I paid for the expensive, unreliable in-flight Wi-Fi, and I went to work. My first email was to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah who had always been quietly suspicious of Alex. The subject line was a single word, contingency. The body of the email was cryptic, a series of instructions disguised as notes for a research paper. I told her to initiate a full-spectrum analysis of all assets, to flag any anomalous transfers over the past 6 months, and to place a temporary observational hold on all accounts, effective immediately. I told her I had uncovered a critical, structural flaw in a long-term partnership and that we needed to prepare for catastrophic failure. She would understand the code. My second email was to a man named David Chen, a forensic accountant who was a legend in his field, a man known for his ability to find money that didn't want to be found. I had consulted with him once on a university endowment fund investigation. I told him I had a complex data set that required his immediate and discreet analysis. I sent him the names of the shell corporations Alex had me sign papers for, the ones I had foolishly believed were part of his Helios venture. The woman Alex thought he had married would have called her mother, weeping. She would have called her best friend, looking for comfort, but he had killed that woman in his study that morning. The woman who was left was a scientist, and she was not looking for comfort. She was looking for data. She was looking for leverage. She was looking for a weapon for the entire flight I worked. I dug through years of our shared digital life, looking at our history through a new, terrifying lens. I found the hidden credit cards, the secret email accounts, the carefully erased travel itineraries. I was an archaeologist, excavating the ruins of my own marriage, and every artifact I found was another piece of his monstrous, intricate lie. He hadn't just been stealing from me. He had been building a whole new life. I found her name in a cached email he had forgotten to delete. Isabella, a beautiful young woman from Brazil. There were pictures of them together on a beach, looking happy, looking real. He had a whole other life, a whole other love, running in parallel to ours. He wasn't just leaving me for money. He was leaving me for someone else, someone who adored him, no questions asked. When the plane landed at Heathrow, I felt a strange sense of calm. The grief was a cold, hard stone in my chest, but the fury had been honed into a sharp, precise instrument. I had a plan. I went through immigration, my face a mask of weary traveler. I collected my bags. And then I did not go to the connecting flight to the Maldives. I took the Heathrow Express into central London. I checked into a small, anonymous hotel under a false name, and I waited. I knew that Alex, landing in Brazil, would check the flight status. He would see that my plane had landed. He would imagine me, tired and unsuspecting, heading to the gate for a connecting flight. He would imagine my confusion, then my dawning panic, as I realized he wasn't there. He would be savoring my pain from half a world away. He had no idea that I was not in the airport. I was in a hotel room, a makeshift war room, and then I was about to turn his perfect, brilliant plan into his own personal hell. He thought he had left me with nothing. He was wrong. He had left me with the one thing he should have feared most, the truth. The first call came from my lawyer, Sarah, 24 hours later. Her voice was a mixture of fury and awe. "Izzy," she said, "it's worse than you can imagine. He's been liquidating your portfolio for almost a year. The shell corporations are a labyrinth, but he made a mistake. He got arrogant. He used the same offshore bank in Zurich for all the final transfers. We can freeze it, but we have to act fast, and we have to have a reason that won't tip him off." "I have a reason," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I'm filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and financial fraud. I want you to file it now. And I want you to serve him." "Serve him?" Sarah asked, confused. "We don't know where he is. He's a ghost." "No," I said, looking at the flight. Information I had found in his deleted emails. "He's not a ghost. He's a man on a very specific schedule. He's meeting his new life, his new partner, at a very specific place. A small, exclusive resort in Bahia, Brazil. And I have that address." My plan was simple, and I thought poetic. I would not have him arrested. I would not engage in a messy, public legal battle. I would do to him what he had planned to do to me. I would erase him. But I would do it not with a fake death, but with the quiet, brutal efficiency of the law. Sarah worked her magic. She contacted a Brazilian law firm. They were aggressive and they loved a good story. The divorce papers were filed. An emergency injunction was granted by a sympathetic judge, freezing all known assets pending the investigation. And a process server was dispatched to a beautiful, sun-drenched resort on the coast of Brazil. I could picture the scene perfectly. Alex, finally free, finally triumphant, sitting on a white sand beach with his adoring, unquestioning new love. He would be sipping a caipirinha, the taste of his victory sweet on his tongue. And then a man in a suit would walk across the sand and hand him a thick legal envelope. He would open it, and his perfect new world would dissolve. The beautiful beach turning into a prison of his own making. He would be trapped in a foreign country, his stolen fortune frozen. His name now attached to a massive international fraud investigation. Revenge, I was discovering, is not a fiery, passionate act. It is a cold, precise, and deeply satisfying. Science. It is about understanding the variables, calculating the trajectories, and applying the exact amount of force required to achieve the desired result. He had thought he was the master of the game. He had no idea I was the one who had written the laws of physics. But as I sat in my London hotel room, a strange, hollow feeling began to creep in. The plan was in motion. Justice in its cold legal form was coming, but it wasn't enough. He had not just stolen my money. He had stolen my life, my trust, my past. A legal victory felt like a sterile, unsatisfying conclusion to such a profound, personal betrayal. I thought about Isabella, the other woman. Was she a co-conspirator? Or was she a victim, just like me? I looked at the pictures of them again. She looked young, happy, and completely, utterly in love. She looked just like I had 10 years ago, and when I knew. My revenge wasn't complete. It wasn't enough to destroy him. I had to save her. I booked a flight. Not to New York, not back to the life I had known. I booked a one-way ticket to Bahia, Brazil. The scientist had done her work. The data was collected. The plan was in motion. Now it was time for the woman to confront the wreckage. Flying into Brazil was like flying into a dream. The lush, green coastline, the turquoise water, the vibrant, chaotic energy of the country. It was a world away from the cold, gray reality I had been living in. I checked into a small, discreet hotel in the town near the resort where Alex was staying. For 2 days, I just watched. I hired a local private investigator, a quiet, professional woman, to observe him. Her reports were exactly as I had imagined. Alex and Isabella were the picture of romantic bliss. They walked on the beach. They dined in expensive restaurants. They were building their new life on the foundation of my stolen one. But the pie also noted something else. Alex was growing agitated. He was constantly on his phone, his charming smile replaced by a worried, angry frown. The process server had found him. The legal net was closing in. He was a man who was beginning to realize his perfect escape had become a cage. On the 3rd day, I made my move. I knew from the pie that Alex had a daily ritual. Every afternoon, he would go to the resort's gym for 2 hours. Isabella would stay by the pool. That was my window. I walked into the resort. I was no longer the heartbroken, invisible wife. I was a woman on a mission. I was dressed simply in a linen sundress, my hair tied back. I looked like any other tourist. I found her by the infinity pool, a book lying unread in her lap, her eyes full of a new, worried confusion, staring out at the sea. She was even more beautiful in person. And she was so young. I walked up to her table. Isabella? I asked, my voice gentle. She looked up, startled. I'm sorry, do I know you? My name is Isabella too, I said, which was the truth. It was my name, Dr. Isabella Rossi. But you know me as Izzy, or at least you know of me. I sat down and I took out a photograph from my purse. It was a picture of me and Alex taken at our wedding 10 years ago. I placed it on the table between. Hughes thought she looked at the photograph, at the smiling, happy couple. She looked at my face in the picture and then at my face now. And her world, just like mine had a week ago, began to fall apart. Who are you? She whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. I'm his wife, I said softly. The real one. The one he told you was dead. The story I told her was not one of anger or revenge. It was a story of assured betrayal. I showed her the proof, the legal documents, the bank statements, the evidence of his 10-year-long deception. I told her about the life he had built with me, the life he had systematically dismantled to fund his escape with her. She wept. Not the loud, dramatic tears of a scorned woman, but the silent, heartbreaking tears of a woman whose entire reality had just been revealed as a lie. She was not his great love, the woman he had chosen over all others. She was just the next mark, the next phase in his parasitic life. The money, she choked out, her face pale with a dawning horror. The money he invested in my family's business. He said it was his inheritance. It was my inheritance, I said gently, and my salary, and the money from the house I thought was ours. He didn't invest in your family, Isabella. He was hiding my money inside your life. We sat by that beautiful, tranquil pool, 2 women from different worlds, our lives now inextricably, tragically linked by the same man's monstrous deception. I had come here to save her, but in telling her my story, I was also, I realized, saving myself. I was no longer just the victim of this crime. I was the narrator of the truth. Our conversation was interrupted by the sight of him. Alex. He was walking back from the gym, a towel slung over his shoulder, a confident swagger in his step. He saw us from a distance. He saw me sitting with her, and he froze. The confident, triumphant man I had seen just days ago was gone. In his place was a cornered, terrified animal. He saw his two worlds, the two carefully separated planets of his universe, colliding in a fiery, cataclysmic explosion. He started to walk towards us, his face a mask of fury and panic. But it was too late. Isabella, the adoring, unquestioning woman he thought he had secured, stood up. She looked at him, her eyes filled not with love, but with a cold, clear, and profound contempt. "It's over, Alex," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "The lies are over." Before he could respond, two men in sharp, official-looking suits appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. They were from the Brazilian Federal Police, alerted by my lawyer. They spoke to him in quiet, polite Portuguese. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. He didn't resist. He just stood there, a defeated man in a tropical paradise, as they took his arms and led him away. His perfect escape, his brilliant new life, was over. He had flown halfway around the world to start a new life, only to find that his past, in the form of two women who were no longer willing to be his victims, had gotten there first. The aftermath was a long, complex, and deeply unsatisfying process of legal and emotional excavation. The story of Alex Sterling, the brilliant entrepreneur who was actually a con man and a bigamist, became a minor international scandal. He was extradited back to the United States, where he faced a mountain of fraud charges. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Isabella and I worked together with our lawyers to untangle the web of his financial crimes. We recovered most of the money. She was able to pay back her family and sever all ties to his toxic legacy. I was able to reclaim my own financial independence. We became, in a strange, unexpected way, friends. We were two survivors of the same shipwreck, two women who had been cast as rivals in a man's selfish drama, who had chosen instead to become allies in our own story of recovery. I did not return to my old life. The loft, the city, the university, it was all tainted by the ghost of the lie I had lived. I resigned from my position. I sold the house. I took my fortune, the one I had earned and then reclaimed, and I did something I had only ever dreamed of. I moved to a small, quiet town in the Chilean Andes, a place with the clearest night skies in the world. I used my money to build a small, independent observatory, a place dedicated not to the grand institutional science of my past, but to a more personal, more profound exploration of the universe. I work with young, aspiring astronomers, teaching them to look at the stars, to find the truth in the vast, silent language of the cosmos. Sometimes at night, as I look through the powerful lens of my telescope at the distant, glittering galaxies, I think of him. I think of the man who had tried to reduce my entire life to a single sad data point in his own selfish equation. He had thought he was a star, a brilliant, burning center of his own universe. But in the end, he was just a black hole, a thing of immense, destructive gravity that consumed everything it touched. He had tried to steal my world, but he had only succeeded in showing me the universe. And in the quiet, starlit darkness of my new life, I was finally, completely, and beautifully free.